The stuff that's been spoken about already is really relevant. The idea of gender was interesting to hear that. I intentionally put up some slides here about, admittedly these aren't endurance runners, but these are male sports where I'm seeing a lot of restrictive eating, weight category, starting to question what's at play. These are clients of mine where there's a lot of talk around weight and $300,000-$400,000 for a kilo lost in LMP1 or Formula 1. So, Simon Sestaric, who's Melbourne-based physiologist who works with Mark Weber on the left, like a lot of talk around his weight because it's a really huge implication to drop that. The engineering team to lose 300 or 400 grams out of a car, $300,000 or $400,000, or even just lose a bit of weight by hitting the sauna. So I am seeing it more and more in male sports, and I thought I'd just mention that. The reason I got the jail picture is I spent a lot of time working in prisons as well, because if we're going to work at the pointy end of elite sport, we're going to work with extreme personalities. By definition, we're working with the extreme. Extreme bodies, extreme personalities, extreme goals, and they have to really be in that very small percentage of the human race. So what comes with that sometimes is extreme somatotype or relationship to their body shape and size. And that's okay, that's okay. The last thing we can do to talk to a bunch of elite coaches is tell you just to take it easy, do less, fatten up your athletes and just, no. I work full time in the industry of chasing high performance. So hopefully seeing a theme though from the previous presenters that it's actually about achieving performance, not hindering performance, if you actually take it seriously. And if you go down the rabbit hole of traditional approaches, you can end up having some pretty serious implications. In terms, one thing I want to throw some scare tactics out. In terms of mortality rate of eating disorder, anorexia and bulimia have the highest mortality rate of any psychopathology we treat as psychologists. More people will die from, major depressive episodes from suicidality, but it's only a small percentage because so many people have mood disturbance. That makes sense. But if you're having an eating disorder, you have the highest likelihood of mortality. And a lot of people in this room are in charge of athletes who might be teetering in that space. And I do want to scare you, I intentionally do. I want you to think about in 15, 20 years' time, if you think about your little squad of athletes and all of a sudden you're losing athletes under your watch, how that might sit with you. So you really do need to take this seriously. You really do. And it's really hard, it's really complex, and as Black has said, once I'm working with them at Com Games or at the Olympics, it's really hard to undo that work. Really hard. It's really entrenched. So we're going to talk a bit today about how you might look for signs and symptoms, how you might have that conversation, and what to look for. Here's our challenge. Characteristics of the elite athletes we work with. In footy clubs, the aggression in the middle they like, maybe not for running, but certainly makes them good competitors, but certainly perfectionism and obsessionality. I'm yet to meet a coach who says they want to take that out of their athletes. And I tend to agree, right? There's these amazing adaptive elements of personality. Elite athletes, by definition, generally are highly perfectionistic, highly obsessional. They get out of bed and do what others don't. They pay attention and have high attention to detail more than others. They'll take themselves into the pit of pain and fatigue more than the average person. It's a really adaptive part of who they are. But you can see the slippery slope that is, right? I do want you to think carefully around the energy intake. Why do you think in Australia, and this is just anecdotally, I don't have the evidence to support it, but why do you think, I think personally, we have a higher rate of exercise-induced anorexia than more traditional food-restrictive stuff that you see in other countries? Anyone want to give us a comment? Someone said social media. What do you mean by that? Okay, so yeah, so social media being used to propagate snake oil and obsessionality with image, maybe? Yeah, didn't think of that?
Whether an outdoor focused lifestyle strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, the answer is we're an outdoor, athletically, sport-orientated country. Absolutely. I see young women and I speak to their parents and they say, just keep a bit of an eye on, oh mate, she is like a horse. She's right, mate, she's just a good, healthy kid out there. So driven though, Jonah. Loves to pound the pavement after school, putting in the Ks. Mate, no eating issues, mate. She's not vomiting. We keep an eye on the toilet, no vomiting going on, and she eats big meals after training. She's doing 120 Ks a week or something, or whatever you guys do. You need to eat like a dinosaur, not a horse. Like, it's the imbalance of intake, not a restrictive eating, whereas often we traditionally think, right, anorexia is restrictive eating, bulimia is purging. No. Exercise is one of the most common means of fostering your eating disorder. Make sense? You've got to really keep an eye on that. Yeah, so those pubescent young teenage girls, really watch what your people may be misinterpreting as she seems to have found her passion. She loves to train hard, she's really driven, she's got some aspirations of being a great athlete. No, she's unwell. She's unwell. And she can still be a great athlete and have a really amazing life and get all the benefits that sport gives. I love sport. Sport matters. Sport is about the pursuit of excellence. Excellence matters. Medicine, engineering, art, music, it's all in the pursuit of excellence. It matters. We want our kids to play sport. We want them to be great at it, not just mediocre. We want them to break world records, and you can do it in the right way. But mastering a pathology, you have to take it really seriously. And I know that I'm on a bit of a soapbox with it, but I see too many young women particularly, and now I'm seeing men. I'm seeing more and more men coming through my office door who are presenting with it as well. So we've got to keep a really close eye on that. I have a really simple way of looking at that, and I'd love everyone maybe today to just, if you've got a piece of paper, and you've got some athletes you're coaching, working with, or family members, or whatever, just draw a little box, a little matrix, and either do one of two things. Pretend you're interviewing them, or even role play and just be them in your head. Be them in your head and think about what they might say as we go around this little matrix. It might give some insight into where they're sitting from a psychological standpoint. The first thing you've got to ask them is what's important? What's important in your life? What do you love? What are the things that really matter? Have a think about what they might answer in that space. Then I might ask them, who's important? Who are the people in your life that are really, really especially important to you? So what's important and who's important? I might even go a bit further and ask, ever thought about your values and what you stand for and what it is you want your life to be about? You know, are they able to go there? So that's step one. Are we hearing a nice, rich tapestry? I love my running. I love my study. I love learning. I love reading. I love skiing. I love my mates. I love gardening. I love, what are we sort of hearing? I love running. I love running. I love gym. I love running, gym. I love cooking. I love looking at Instagram pictures of food. I love narrow, restricted, yeah. Who? Oh, well, pretty lonely running sport. I don't really have meaningful friendships per se. I used to when I was younger, but now it's really just my training partners. Really like my training partners. Love my coach, love my training partners. Restricted. All of a sudden my brain's starting to go, okay, there's some rigidity, there's not really a lot of flexibility. Keeping in mind, oh, Jonah, but professional athletes, that's their gig. No, it's not. Don't give me that crap. I work with Olympians for 15, 20 years, please. They've got friendship circles, they've got interests, they've got hobbies, they've got stuff. They don't have a lot of time. I'm not talking about time. They've got to train a lot. This isn't a time factor, this is interest, passion, and what matters to them. Okay? Restricted self-concept. Everything below the x-axis here internal things in your mind, thoughts, images, doubt, dreams, hopes, aspirations. On the bottom left-hand side, I'll be that athlete again in your mind. And I'll say, okay, so you love your running, you love your training partners, you love your food, you love being elite, you love success. That's cool, that's the good stuff. Now let's talk about the stuff that's really hard. As a parent, I love my kids, but they also make me anxious and angry and frustrated, right? Things you love also give you tough stuff. So let's go there. You love your sport, you love your running. What's the tough stuff? And here's the number one probe I do with endurance athletes if I'm a bit concerned about where they're sitting on that spectrum. What happens when you're injured? I could almost assess energy deficiency syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, through us in that one question. What happens when you're injured? What happens when you can't burn those calories? What emotions show up? Now, we're talking about performance. Yeah, obviously some anxiety, some worry, some uncertainty, the normal pre-competition nerves. But if it's something more around sadness, obsessionality, lack of control, feeling really disordered in thinking, anger, frustration, lying, doing, which brings me to the next quadrant at the top. This is the big one for you guys as coaches and staff and support personnel. What are they doing because of that? So, what I'm talking about here is exercise, my sport's really important to me. Great. What are the tough stuff that shows up, especially when you're injured or you've got setbacks or anxiety, obsessionality, sadness, anger, agitation, okay? What do you do when you're feeling that? What do you do to get rid of your anxiety? What do you do to get rid of your anger? What do you do to get rid of your obsessionality? What do you do when you're feeling really, distressed? And normally it's cry, yell, restrict my eating because I'm not running and burning the calories, so my diet gets really restrictive, or really obsessional with my food, really obsessional with my training in terms of rehab. Not elite, not professional, not high attention to detail, obsessional. There's a difference. We know people who have disordered eating and eating disorders. It's a rigidity, and I use a lot of metaphor. If you've got a stress ball, the stress ball. Oh, I'm stressed, Jonah. I've got to squeeze the stress ball. I say, life's a bit that way. What happens when you clamp down on the stress ball? Where does it go? Does that ball that's still full of rice and made of a balloon or whatever, when you squeeze it, does the ball disappear, get smaller? No, it just comes out the side, it moves. That's what anxiety does. Okay? Eating is disordered eating is anxiety disorder. So you squeeze down on it. So I'm trying to control it through running. Oh, now I can't run because I'm injured. Boom, it just bulges out somewhere else. It'll show up in something else. It'll show up in cutting, nipping, restrictive eating, doing things, diuretics, controlling the people around me, etc., etc. So you've got to keep a really close eye on, is that pattern showing up? Yeah? Versus the top right, which is really what we want. What actions, what behaviours are really in the service of nurturing your health and performance? That's sitting down with my team, making sure my energy is at the right zone, right in that fine line between tipping over the edge and being in the good zone. That's what elite sport's about, but really doing it well. Training smart, listening to my doctor, listening to my physio, listening to my dietitian, listening to the psychologist. Yeah? Still pursuing, and so what I'm trying to highlight here is this. Let's say I had an athlete who had said, when I get really anxious, because of my anxiety, because of my maybe disordered concept of self and body image, what have you, top left, when I feel really crappy about myself, I run. I hit the pavement, I go out and do a massive session. So running is serving a purpose of trying to control our internal experience. But hang on, running can also be here. Running can also be a towards move. I want to be an elite, successful athlete. And I say absolutely. And this is really critical to learn. I could be really into my diet and eat healthy and do lots of running as a great towards move to being the best athlete I can be, to nurture my values and thrive and live the best version of myself. Or I could do very similar behaviours, but the underlying mechanism is feeding a disorder, feeding a pathology. And that's what makes it so hard for us in the industry to differentiate. Does that make sense? I don't want to get too Dr. Phil, but hopefully that, like, the metaphor I use is drinking, right? When I'm stressed, busy, anxious, whatever, from travelling to Australia and trying to get home, and I've got the daughter trying to bungee jump off the roof, and the 5-month-old kid's not sleeping, and yeah, that first glass of wine goes down pretty quick. That's not because I'm a wine wanker and I enjoy Pinot and I like the leathery characteristics and the cherry notes. No, that's me just trying to drink to get rid of my stress and whatever. But I also have drinking in the top right, because I love wine, that's what I do. I like doing it with my friends and my family, it's a really enjoyable activity. I like to run as well. It can be in both services. So it's really critical to get to know your athletes and say, what function is that behaviour serving? Because it can look the same. And we misinterpret it, maybe sometimes a little bit. It's easier to, because it's a bit hard to go down that conversation. And they're elite, they're driven, it's part of the sport. Low weights, part of being an endurance runner. Yep, I hear that, don't quite buy it. It's the underlying thing that's serving it. I really want to empower that for you to go away and maybe have some thinking around your squads, people you're working with, and can you answer it? What mechanism is that running serving? The best way you can answer it is when it's taken away, what do? Every athlete gets frustrated when they're injured, that's normal. Every athlete gets a bit pent up and I want to do more, that's normal. But you know when it's actually an underlying pathology because you see a lot more distress. Or you see a lot more control behaviours. They may not report being sad or anxious. They may not say, oh, I'm really struggling with it. You can say, what have you been up to? We haven't been doing the caves. What have you been up to? Oh, no, I've just been... And all of a sudden it's this obsessional food stuff or etc, etc, etc. So it can be a behavioural response. Does that make sense, or is that too... You've got to keep an eye on it. You've got to keep an eye on it. Because it, like I said, you set up early patterns. I remember speaking to somebody who was working in Australian Ballet, and they talk about eating disorders being a virus. The moment one of those girls starts to tip over into the zone of, oh, this isn't looking good, they actually isolate them. Literally, they put them in a different room, away from the other girls, because they've studied it, and it actually catches. It catches. It's a fascinating psychological condition. Not depression doesn't catch. Other things don't seem to catch. Eating disorder amongst groups does, so you've got to keep an eye on your squad as well. And if you think you've got somebody who might be in that zone, you might need to seriously think a bit about, do we actually put them away from your other squad members until that work is done, because there's certainly some interesting data around, particularly in young females, the transferability of that. Yeah. The question was, is there, because of some ergogenic perception that being lower weight leads to performance enhancement? It might be, I don't know the actual etiology of those mechanisms. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's, again, I've looked into it and they haven't actually got the true finding yet. They know the outcome, they know that young women who are exposed to a team member or a colleague or a partner or somebody who displays that, you increase the likelihood of somebody else in that squad developing those patterns just dramatically. Exploring why is so biopsychosocial factors. One of those probably would be the... Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, does it work in the reverse as well?
What do you mean?
In terms of, I know you're talking about negative stuff, but maybe someone who's very positive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, social constructivism, right? The question was, does it work in reverse? Absolutely. If you've got somebody who's thriving, and they're just talented, right? They're a very good competitor, and they seem to have their stuff together, and they're eating well, keeping their body right in that right zone, dipping into, I would argue that's a pretty powerful effect maybe on that group. So it should have some buffering